Greetings and various assorted salutations. Welcome to another basics introduction for ancient civilizations. Today's topic is the Aztecs, the civilization located in Central America. So first off, let's start off with our modern day references. The Aztecs predominantly come up a lot in Mexican nationalism. Mexicans often draw upon Aztec symbols and history as a foundation of their nation. It's a way of kind of creating a separate narrative from the Spanish colonial story of when the Spanish Empire was chased out, Mexico needed a nationalistic heritage to turn to, and so in many cases they turned to the Aztecs, especially their symbol. The Aztecs are famous for having an eagle atop a cactus killing a snake, which is part of their mythology. Also, a lot of Mexican locations use Aztec names. This might be something you might notice a bit more if you're studying Spanish. There's a lot of Spanish words that are used for things, but when you get to Mexico, there's a bunch of words that clearly aren't drawn from Spanish. And in many cases, that's often from Aztec. The Aztec language. So, to talk about who the Aztecs were, the Aztecs are a group of people called the Nahuatl, which I probably mispronounced, and I do apologize for that. And they're actually just one group. There were a whole bunch of different groups that lived in this area. The Aztecs happened to be the strongest ones and the last ones in charge of most of the area before the Spanish arrived. And they all spoke different dialects of this language. And the Aztecs were one particular group. As to where? Modern-day central Mexico. They built grand city-states and traded and warred amongst each other. The Aztecs were based out of the city, where the Aztecs were located is what is now known as modern Mexico City, Tlaxcalan, and it was on a lake. By the time the Spanish showed up, the Aztecs had conquered most of the city-states and had created an empire. Here's kind of some artistic representations of what their grand city was like. You can think of it kind of like, it's a Venice of the New World, if you want to think of it that way. It was a complex system of causeways, bridges, canals that created this city. To give you an idea of what the Aztec Empire looked like, this is where the Aztecs were located. Is in this area, and which is mostly modern-day Mexico. Let's see here. But, yes. Now, the Aztec Empire as we know them, the empire that rules over these states, goes from about 1420 to 1521. However, we do know that city-states date back as far as the 1300s. And that's AD. Now, how it was organized? The city-states were highly organized around warrior class, kings, and priests, and religion played a major part of Aztec culture. That's not to say that, like in Mayan and Incan civilizations, religion didn't play as large of a role, but a lot of what we know about the Aztecs is around their religion. The Aztecs ruled through military dominance in battle, and essentially they didn't have an empire like we might think of the Roman Empire per se. What the Aztecs did is they kind of ruled through a tributary system. Essentially, all these other city-states that they had defeated in battle would pay tribute and slaves and sacrifices and whatnot, which incidentally created a very dangerous environment for the Aztecs later on. But this is how they kind of organized, is they ruled, they defeated their opponents militarily, and then in response they paid tribute. Here's some pictures of different Aztec warriors. This is one of their classic weapons. We'll be looking at it in more detail in our Ancient Civilizations activities. The thing to keep in mind is the Aztecs, like many of the civilizations of the New World, they did not have access to metals, and processed metals for like iron and copper or bronze, and so they had to improvise a lot. Notable architecture. The Aztecs, like many of the city-state builders in Central and South America, were very good at architecture. As stated before, they had floating gardens. Essentially what they do is they build these barges, and they'd allow the root systems to go through the floating barge, and the plants would water themselves. But grand temples, things like that were important to the Aztecs. The reason why I say a lot of their stuff was destroyed is the Spanish went out of their way to destroy as much of the Aztec architecture and culture as possible in an effort to colonize the area and convert it to Christianity. Now for a bit of our feature activity, we're going to look at the end of the Aztecs. It's quite a grand story. We mainly have the Spanish perspective because, you know, they won and they made sure that there were very few surviving sources afterwards. The Aztecs were conquered by the Spanish Empire through conquistadors like Hernan Cortez. Though, of course, the Spanish did not do this alone. As I stated before, the Aztecs were a very warlike people. They had defeated most of their opponents, but there were a lot of city-states that were very disgruntled with the Aztecs. And when the Spanish came through, this is one of those common stories you see in world history, but when a new power comes in, often European, the local forces realize, these guys could change things up for us. And so many city-states joined in with the Spanish in helping topple the Aztecs. And then the Spanish, in turn, kind of became the central power. I took a colonial Mexico class when I was in college that talked about the politics and inner workings of it. But essentially what the Spanish were able to do was kind of insert themselves as the replacement to the Aztecs as the supreme ruling area of that area. The other thing that really helped with the conquest was smallpox and various old world diseases, as we've talked about before, especially in Central America with the heavily urbanized populations. The Mayans, the Aztecs, and the Incans were hit very hard by these diseases that spread very easily through urban environments. This is a depiction of the spread of smallpox. But no. There's more to the story of the Aztecs. I'm just going over some of the parts that may not be covered as much because, you know, like there was some confusion as to who was Hernan Cortez. Was he a god? Was he the sign of end times? And so the Aztecs have that going on. But the capital of the Aztecs fell after an 8-month siege using a combination of infantry and warships to fight on the lake. And we're told by Spanish accounts, and you'll be able to read the Spanish account in one of our assignments, that the battle for the capital was an epic battle with, according to the Spanish accounts, prisoners of war were being dragged up and sacrificed in the middle of the battle. There were fires. People were getting shoved into the water and drowning. It was a very violent, very active battle, according to Spanish accounts. And you'll be able to read about that if you choose to with one of the activities. One fun historical factor. The Spanish actually tried to build a trebuchet. You know, it's a fancy type of catapult used mostly in the medieval ages with a swinging arm to launch projectiles. However, when they built it, the first projectile they launched, a rock, launched it straight up in the air, and then it fell straight back down and destroyed the trebuchet. Just kind of a fun little historical factor. But the Aztecs would ultimately be defeated, and Spanish culture would kind of prevail. Afterwards, the Spanish would rule over the lands that the Aztec held. Actually, they'd rule over pretty much all of South and Central America, and they'd rule over Mexico in particular until 1822. in which case the Mexican people would overthrow the Spanish Empire, drive them out, and set up their own empire. Mexican history then kind of succeeds into different events. They have a republic at one point. They have a German that they bring in to be an emperor. They kind of go all. They have some dictatorships. Mexico's history really starts in 1822, but they will trace back nationalistically to the Aztecs. And that kind of concludes the very brief introduction to the Aztec civilization.